Hello, YouTube. I'm Vince White. I'm an employment attorney, and we're answering publicly posted questions. This time, it's another question from Pam Maroon. She posted a question 10 days ago. Can't believe I've been keeping her waiting all this time. Also, don't mean to assume anything. Here is Pam Maroon's question. I have a generic follow up related question. So, if someone is making a charge of any discrimination except age discrimination, but that person is also of age discrimination age, does that change the escalated amount? For example, what's the difference between sexual harassment and retaliation for a 20 something versus a 40 something in terms of compensation and damages? Okay, so there's a weird thing in employment law. You need to split what's called the liability, which is all the claims and the likelihood that any or some of those claims win. That's called the liability. We'll set that over here. And then there's damages. We set that over here. And often what you're going to see is bifurcated hearings and even a bifurcated approach to how we handle cases. So often I'll roll in and I'll have a case with like 6 claims, right? There might be retaliation claims, there might be age discrimination claims, there might be gender claims, there might be sexual harassment claims. All of these things can be going on at the same time, and we can litigate all of them, often grouped together. So we then look at the likelihood that any of these claims wins. Now, there's some differences in claims, like retaliation claims give rise to punitive damages, and other claims often don't. But generally speaking, that is the lay of the land. You're really looking to see, did any of these claims win? And then if any of the claims win, we go from liability and we go over here to damages. And that's great, right? Because you only need you could theoretically have like 30 claims in play, all of which are legitimate, and win one of them, and you go to damages, right? That's amazing because the pool of damages doesn't change that much. Here's how damages do change. And I have a couple of videos on how to calculate damages. But the core of your question is, does a 20-something who's experienced sexual harassment and retaliation have a claim that's worth more than a 40-something who's experienced the same claims, the same sexual harassment, the same retaliation? And the answer is maybe. And here's a couple reasons. One, statistically speaking, a 40-something-year-old often earns more than a 20-year-old. Not always, but often, right? So your economic damages for the person who earns more has a good chance of being higher, right? If you make 100 grand a year and, your attorney achieves a settlement of 3 years for you, well, that is way more than somebody who makes 20 grand a year. And I'm not saying 20 somethings make 20 grand a year necessarily. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with making 20 grand a year. I'm saying if you are making 20 grand a year and you get a settlement of about 3 years of your average earnings, well, you're making 60K instead of 300K, right? In this example. The other thing that goes on is there's some biases towards age. If you have a 20-something who's got the same identical sexual harassment and retaliation, people will often treat that 20-something as if they're going to bounce back and be fine. That may be true, that may not be true. But a 40-something, people, juries, judges often say, "Woo, this exactly identical sexual harassment and retaliation claim must have been so hard on you." Yeah, the emotional damages could be much higher. And some of the discretionary damages in terms of the punitive damages could be higher. Is that the way the law is written? No. The law is written, hey, this person who experienced this person has a disposition, a mental health, they are who they are, they come to the situation, and they experience these events of sexual harassment and retaliation. How bad was that for this individual? And how much money do we want to give them to kind of make them whole for what they experienced, given everything they experienced and their disposition entering the situation, right? There's kind of a rude phrase in this industry called the eggshell plaintiff. And what that essentially means is like, it comes from personal injury. If you've fallen down 6 times and every time you cracked your skull, and now there's like your skull is always at risk, right? Because it's been cracked so many times, it's healed up, you're alive, you're walking around, and someone drops, I don't know, a salt shaker on your head. That salt shaker could kill you, literally, because your head's been harmed so many times, it's been weakened, you're at risk now, right? Me, I don't know, you could probably drop a weight on my head and I'll probably be fine. I'm just not, it's different, right? So that idea of the eggshell plaintiff is, it's not the average human being or just any human being, it's this human being and how these events impacted this human being with all of their health and all of their disposition and everything as they brought to the situation, right? It's not, nobody, give you an example, right? Victim of childhood domestic violence. Goes to work, working, has a aggressive coworker who gets physical in very similar ways to how perhaps that person's parent got physical with them when they were younger. The PTSD, the various traumas that that individual brings to the situation are vastly different than if I'm walking in and my coworker gets a little physical with me and wants to slap my butt, right? I'm mad. I don't want that and I don't consent. But I'm not going to be harmed in the same way as the person who's going to be experiencing traumas very similar to what they experienced as a child, who may have lingering mental health impacts from that experience as a child, right? Like, it's not the same, and that's important. And this has become a long diatribe about how we calculate emotional damages, but my point is, it's not necessarily the age, it's the time that you have to build up a larger potential earnings pool, right? You might earn more as you get older, and a lot more can happen to you in your life. So statistically speaking, yes, there might be a reason why a 40-something-year-old might get more in damages than a 20-something-year-old. Part of that is jury bias. Part of that is the time to accumulate more trauma. Or even just being diagnosed, right? To get a little bit older and have the responsible notion that I should get my mental health checked and I should be diagnosed and I should be working on this, right? I don't know how many people in their 20s have the maturity to do that, but a diagnosis certainly could impact what you get in emotional damage as well. So the age itself is not the key, but kind of the things that go along with age could be the key in how that damages calculation could be different. I feel like this is a very long answer. I hope it was useful. If it was, consider liking and subscribing. Helps me to help more people just like you. And yeah, I'm in Utah, so I made this last Friday, and I hope that you're all wonderful, and I will be back on Thursday.